do affect wider society. We do affect the wider world, definitely. Subtly, indirectly, and directly. Yeah, there's definitely. So then you can see those ripples of interconnectedness go much wider. Very glad to be in good health and back here and with you all on Sangha Day, celebrating what we've got together. Not just us, but part of, a whole lineage that goes back 2,500 years, back to the Buddha, and then, but also, so that's in time, if you like, but also through space. You know, we're part of a movement, a global movement that's at least 100,000 people that are celebrating this over this period. I don't know if it's this very day, but over this week or two, they're celebrating Sangha Day. Sangha Day is always celebrated around the full moon in November. So, yeah, through space, through time, we're part of this wonderful kind of global movement. I want to go back to 27 years to October 1995, when I was 22 years old, and I was in a town called Pokhara. And any of you who've been to Nepal and done any trekking in Nepal might know Pokhara, because that's the town where the trekkers gather, and then off you go to do the Annapurna trek. And I was there 20 years old, just finished university, just graduated in economics, a degree in economics. I had a job set up at JP Morgan, and this was my gap year, as they say. It was my chance to sort of broaden the mind a bit before I set about the serious business of enriching myself and all the rest of it. So I was there, and I was with these two. I'd met these two New Zealand girls. I say girls, we were pretty young, and one of them, of course, I quite liked, and I was hoping might lead somewhere. Never did, but so it's to spoil the story. But we did go. We were going to go whitewater rafting, all that kind of thing. We're walking down the high street of Pokhara. I say high street, I mean it's the only street. It was just one of those, like from a western, where you just had one kind of dusty street with shops all the way down the side and hotels, and that was it. I'm sure it's changed now. And it's right next to this beautiful lake. And as we were walking down the street, the three of us, on the right hand side there was this building that said Buddhist Temple. Buddhist Temple. It wasn't a Tibetan thing. I'm not talking about with ornate pagodas and stuff. It was just a normal looking building, but it said Buddhist Temple. And I stopped and I said, I've always been interested in Buddhism. Well, I'm not sure if that was true, anyway. But I was interested enough to stop, and I said to Katie, I said, "Come on, I'm interested in that anyway." And she said, "Oh, why don't you go in? Why don't you go in and find out more about it?" And I said, "No, I won't do that." She said, "Go on," and she gave me a nudge. So I went in. They didn't come in actually. They stayed out. And I went in and walked upstairs. This beautiful room with glass all the way from the floor to the ceiling, looking out over Lake Pokhara, which is a beautiful lake, large still lake. And I'm sure it wasn't always still, but anyway, it's still in my mind, this beautiful large lake. And I'm up there, and there was no one around. There's this lovely wooden floor and a view and a Buddha, I'm sure, and no one there. And then this guy came out, a Westerner actually, not what I was expecting. And he came over and he said, "Hello, can I help you?" Turned out he was Swiss, and he was, I guess he was a monk. I can't quite remember what he was wearing, but obviously he was running this vihara, this Buddhist temple, and I was quite sort of direct. That's the other part of Vajra, is what you're quite sort of direct. And I just said, "So tell me, what's Buddhism?" And he answered me in a similarly sort of concise and direct way, and he said, "Interconnectedness." Interconnectedness. I was like, "Oh, okay." And I don't remember him saying anything else. I don't remember anything else happening. I just remember that answer, which I didn't make much sense of. And he wasn't wasn't sort of verbose guy in any sense. He didn't say any more as that I remember. And that was it. And I left, and then carried on up the street. But it must have had some effect, because I found myself doing something I'd never done before, which I found myself sitting alone, looking out over the lake in this cafe, listening to my first ever trip hop music, which was Leftism, Left Field's Leftism. If you remember, that album came out in 1995, and I was just sitting there listening to this very sort of meditative music, which I'm still rather fond of, and just looking out over this lake and feeling incredibly calm and at peace. And well, happy, just really happy. In a way, that was, I've only thought about it particularly in relation to giving this talk today, that was the start of a journey that's brought me 27 years later to be standing in front of you all. And I've been called Amalavajra and, living this life, which, it's fair to say is completely centred on the Dharma, on practicing and spreading Buddhism. That's what I've done for the last 27 years, So, or most of it. Well, not every minute of the day, just to be clear, but that's been the centre of my life. So, and in a way, that's what ordination is. That's what, if you're wondering what ordination is the moment when you say, okay, this is the heart of what I want to do. Yes, I may still have a career, I may still have children, I may still have a house, I may still have my investments or whatever your other various refuges are, but this is the very heart of all of that. All of that revolves around this, around the three jewels, around the Buddha, the Dharma, and yes, the Sangha. So, as I say, I didn't make much sense of interconnectedness. I'm going to try and make sense of it today with you, although I still think it's quite a mysterious idea. Of course, one can see it in a very pragmatic sense. Like the fact that we're all sitting here today is obviously the fruit of a vast, infinite number of conditions that came together to bring us here. I mean, obviously all the conditions that led to your birth, including your parents going on a first date or whatever they did, however they met, you then gestating in your mother's womb, everything that followed since then, you surviving childhood and then looking after you, and everything that's followed, including people like Viranaga and Maitranara deciding, hey, why don't we start, well, not start, there was also something happening here actually, sorry to be fair, but anyway, why don't we go and put a load of energy, let's join Lama Pushpa and all the others, sorry, I can't do credit to everyone, and let's get this class going. Let's teach Buddhism in Brixton, and here you are, and you've said, yeah, I like that, and you're here. So you can sort of see interconnectedness in that kind of sense, and it's lovely connection with gratitude as well, I think. It seems like it also almost goes to sort of deeper and subtler levels of the mind as well, doesn't it? That feels like there's a deep interconnectedness that goes even beyond those kind of, in a way, quite profound reflections. I'll see if I can touch on those, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, just to mention one thing, like on the mind level, just to say now, which is, there's a very good friend of mine called Lalata Viewer, who's unfortunately dying right now. He's down in Brighton. I would have really loved to have spent the rest of the day with you, but I'm going to have to leave as soon as I've finished this and go down there and see him and hopefully see him before he dies. But just to say, like, I feel very deeply connected with him right now. So in a way, on that mental level, that feels very real as well. You'll have all had your moments of vision. Sangha, as you may know, talks about vision and transformation, these stages of what in Buddhism says the Noble Eightfold Path. You'll have all had your moments of vision that inspired you to look for something beyond just the normal, I guess, worldly aims of maximising pleasure and minimising pain. Basically, you could summarise that's what life in the normal mainstream sense is about, isn't it? It's stringing together as many pleasurable experiences as possible and minimising the unpleasant experiences. That's mostly how we naturally manage our lives. You've all had a vision, I'm sure, of something beyond that, which is why you're here instead of, I don't know, just out in the sunshine somewhere, because you've responded to reality, to the reality of life and death, of birth and death, of the potential of your mind, of the human mind. You've got a sense, I'm sure, some experience maybe comes to you, or many experiences. Maybe it was a meditation, maybe it was on a retreat, maybe it was a death actually. Death often, or separation, divorce, separation often leads to the kind of experience that opens one up to what we call the spiritual life, the life of meaning. But then there's the question, what do we do with that? So we have that moment, like I had that moment in Pokhara, but then what do you do with it? What do you do then? So you have this, what do they call it, sort of peak experience, but what do you do then? of course, what you want to do, I imagine, and the reason you're here is you think I want to bring my whole life up to that kind of level of awareness, of love, of appreciation of beauty, of connection, sense of connection with others, with the world. I want my whole life to be like that. And then you hear about the Buddha, and as I did, learn that the Buddha lived in that state all the time. That is probably the nearest approximation we can talk about to the enlightened state. And you probably had the sense of, I would love that. I would love that. I certainly did. And so then you think, okay, what do I do? Right? And well, I guess then the Dharma jewel starts to shine, and you learn to meditate, come to classes here or go on retreats. Maybe you study Buddhism, maybe you read books on Buddhism. That's certainly what happened to me. I after this trek, I then learned to meditate in Kathmandu, actually with Western Order members, from our order. And you'll be on, you've done your own version of that. I remember reading buying this little book from one of the traveller bookshops by the Dalai Lama, The Power of Compassion. I've still got it somewhere. That was the first Buddhist book I read. But there's a catch, isn't there? There's a real catch. In some ways, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, I'll qualify what I'm saying. But we'll have a very clear idea. Right, I want to be a better person. I mean, who here has not ever? You don't have to put your hand up because it'd be too embarrassing. But who here has not had the thought, I want to be a better person? I want to be a more generous person. I want to be a more loving person. I want to be a wiser person. I want to be a more aware person. Who hasn't had that thought? Everyone has that thought. That's where New Year's resolutions come from, right? They come from that thought, which is obviously not a Buddhist thought, it's a human thought. Everybody wants to be a better person. There have been literally billions of people. There are billions of people right now, and there's certainly throughout history, who've had that thought, I want to be a better person, in all those ways, many other ways too. And yet, how hard it is to actually do, how hard it is to act on that vision, on that moment of vision. I mean, of course, I could give sort of trite examples of, of wanting to lose weight and how that enthusiasm of the first week or two and that discipline of not eating any sweet things for a week or two, to exercising everything, how quickly that falls away. I don't know why. I'm not going to try and answer why that is so hard, but we just know it's hard, right? Am I right? It's hard. I mean, I have to say for myself, here I am, I've been doing this for 27 years, since 95. And I was very irritable as a young man, as a child, and I still can be irritable. I can still lose my patience with my partner talking yet again about her difficulties with her mother. Sometimes just get really fed up with that, and I just don't manage to be empathetic and patient with that, and that's a shame. I feel frustrated with that, something I've been working on for 27 years and still, fall short. So it's hard. It's very, very hard to actually grow, to change, despite that vision. Even if that vision comes again, you go on a great retreat and you're enthused again, or you have a great meditation or a great conversation with a friend, or whatever it is that kind of gets you going, inspires you. So why is that? Why is that so hard? Bloody hell. Well, I would say in some ways it's just the power of what to call it, self-clinging, egotism, individualism. I mean, the self, basically the problem of the self. The very thing that we want to transcend is the thing that holds us back. You're saying, okay, of course, you've all read books that say this, you've all heard talks that say this. Well, I think it's true. I think that kind of delusion of me, the ego project, as one of my teachers says, is the very thing that kind of gets us going, is also the thing that holds us back. I remember when I first got into Buddhism, I had this idea that I would become like a Buddha. That would be such a great thing. I'd be like a Buddha, and then I wouldn't be touched by suffering, because we all know the Buddha didn't suffer, right? I mean, he suffered physically. If he banged his thumb with a hammer, he'd feel pain, but he wouldn't suffer any mental or emotional pain. Yeah, right? We all know that. So that sounds great, doesn't it? So that's the kind of idea I had about Buddhism, that I would become somehow untouched by pain and suffering. I'm sorry if that's your vision as well. It doesn't, I'm not saying it doesn't work, I'm saying that motivation isn't going to work. That motivation isn't going to work. But that's fine, okay, it kept me going for a few years, and then I realised that wasn't going to work. But that basically what I'm trying to focus on is that very sort of strongly self-led, self-centred, if you like, although I know that's a very loaded term, isn't it? Idea of the spiritual life isn't going to work. This idea that me, Amalavajra, or Matthew as I was back then, I'm going to transcend suffering. I'm going to grow. I'm going to become bigger. I'm going to become more generous. I'm going to become more wise. I'm going to be happier. It's the wrong view, if you like. It's the wrong view. It's therefore it doesn't work. But it gets you on the path, so that's good. It gets you on the path, but it's not, of course, the view of an enlightened being. That's not what a Buddha is thinking. They're not thinking, isn't life great? And I've really succeeded, and I've reached my goal, and isn't that great? I mean, actually, as soon as I say that, the Buddha did actually celebrate his enlightenment, didn't he? After enlightenment. So anyway, but I think what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to explore what's the problem, what gets in the way, and it's the problem of self. That's what gets in the way. That's why, even with that moment of great vision, actually it's hard to achieve what one is looking for. Even with the help of the Dharma, even with the wisdom accumulated over 2,500 years, it's available to us in a way that's never been available throughout history. You know, if you were lucky, you'd get a little bit of Buddhism of a particular type from a monk who happened to live locally in wherever you were, Sri Lanka or India. Now we've got access to everything, for better and worse. So yeah, it's very hard. Basically, my point is you can't do it on your own. You can't do it from the basis of ego. Any sharp ones out there amongst you might be saying, hold on, what about the Buddha? Siddhartha, he left home, he went forth, he spent 7 years, he did do it on his own, actually. He did do it on his own. Siddhartha did gain enlightenment on his own, from his own will. And that certainly is how his story looks, although, as you know, he also did have teachers along the way. My answer to that would be, okay, and Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, was clearly an extraordinarily talented and determined man, by any standards. And I mean, on the night that he gained enlightenment, he said, I'm going to sit here until my blood dries up, until I get enlightened. I don't know about you, I get fidgety after about 20 minutes. You know, my leg goes a bit numb and I think, oh, maybe that's enough. Yeah, he was like, I'm going to sit here until my blood dries up under this tree. By the way, up until that point, he'd done all sorts of extreme austerities, living on so the legends go a grain of rice per day, you know, for weeks. And he got so thin you could see his backbone, you could see through his stomach. He got so thin, you know, his ribs all protruding. So he was a very determined guy, I think we can safely say. Plus, according to tradition, with incredible lifetimes of merit, you know, of this wasn't his first go at this. So yes, but there aren't many Buddhists. There aren't even many. There aren't many Siddharthas. There aren't even many, if you think about it, Martin Luther Kings or Gandhis. You know, although we all want to be better people, it's a real challenge to actually be be one of those people. So sorry to be. I'm going to give you the good bit now. I just want it sorry to be downbeat. I'm now going to cheer up a bit because there is an answer, and the answer is this. The answer is Sangha. We don't have to do it alone. We don't do it alone. None of us, thanks to the Buddha, none of us do it alone, because after the Buddha had gained enlightenment under that Bodhi tree, as we call it, in what's now Bodh Gaya in northeast India, he did decide to pass on what he'd seen. He did decide to teach what we call the Dharma. He did decide to teach awakening. And the story goes that he walked to what's now Benares or Varanasi, and he to the deer park, and he gave the teachings to the 5 ascetics, his former companions in eating a grain of rice a day, etc. That we always tell that story on Dharma Day in July. But then once they kind of got the idea, once they become enlightened, he then sent them forth. He said, okay, for the Bahojinatai, for the welfare of the many, go forth and teach what you've seen. And he even said, actually, somewhat controversially in our circles, no two of you go in the same direction. No two of you should go in the same direction. Go all in different directions and spread what you've learned, what you've seen. Thanks to that, here we are. Here we are. So that was the beginning of the Sangha, and that's what we're celebrating today. The fact that we're not alone, trying to work out life's mysteries and trying to learn and grow and awaken. We're not alone. We've got inspiration from those much more experienced than us. That whole lineage of teachers, all the way down to Sangharakshita, who founded this movement 55 years ago, drew out the Buddhist community, and indeed to those, his disciples in turn in the order. And we've also got the support and encouragement of our peers, of other people. It's very rare in my experience to be kind of permanently inspired. In fact, I can't quite imagine it. So it's great when a friend's just come back from a retreat or just had a really good meditation or a really good study group, that they can remind us, and they could be much less experienced than us, it's not necessarily they're more experienced, they remind us of, mindfulness, generosity, really basic stuff. That's what we can get from the Sangha as well. So there's the inspiration from those really experienced. There's also just the sort of reminder, the encouragement of our friends around us, like here. So yeah, we need help. We need the help of brothers and sisters, of friends in the Sangha, and that's what we're celebrating today. So I've got this little model I want to share with you, of which I've just developed on the way, of 3 levels of engagement in the Sangha. And you can see where you spot yourself on these 3 levels. No judgment, no one's going to ask you. 3 levels of engagement in the Sangha. And I think this does connect back to, I hope it connects back to interconnectedness. The 3 levels are recipient, participant, and contributor. They're not really, I'll have to think of animals or something, it'd be better, wouldn't it? But anyway, they're a bit technical terms, aren't they? Recipient, participant, and contributor to the Sangha. So I'll tell my own story a bit to illustrate these. So, recipient. This is what we all are when we first come along to the Sangha, I would suggest, unless we're very unusual, I certainly was. Basically, we come to get something, right? In my case, I basically wanted the pleasure of meditation. That's why I came to the London Buddhist Centre. I had this great experience in Nepal and I wanted more of it. So I came to the London Buddhist Centre to meditation classes to get more bliss. Which, as you probably know by now, you don't get it that much if you really want it that much. But anyway, that's why. But I certainly enjoyed meditating. I enjoyed the calm and I enjoyed just having a break. I remember going off this. I travelled from work, and I remember one time in particular going and meditating in the London Buddhist Centre shrine room, and just in a class like this, and at the end of it, opening my eyes and seeing all these flowers that appeared on the shrine. These beautiful displays of flowers had appeared on the shrine, and then I realised, oh no, they probably were there before. I definitely hadn't heard anyone scraping past with vases of flowers. They'd been there before, but suddenly, of course, I was there loving the beauty of these flowers, really feeling present or alive to these flowers. So I enjoyed that, I liked that, but I definitely didn't want to have anything to do with Buddhism. I thought the idea of having a Sanskrit name was really almost laughable. Like, why would you do that? And I felt like I was just kind of going in, getting what I wanted, and then going home. And I loved the fact that at the London Buddhist Centre there were so many people, like often 60, 80, even 100 people, that I could be anonymous and no one would know who I was. I could just come in, do the class, and then I could go. I could go and sort of get the goods and get the meditation off and went. And I did, that was definitely my attitude. I mean, of course I was happy enough to put something in the bowl. I recognised I needed to pay for my high, so I would do that. But that was definitely my attitude to the Sangha. I was a recipient, even a consumer, to be honest. I was like treating it as though I was going to a salsa dancing class or something like that, a nightclub or whatever. You pay your fee, get your benefit, and off you go back home to your life. So that was very much, in terms of interconnectedness, very much me, basically. Okay, there's these various things that I could recognise they're putting on the class, so I'm connected in a way, but a very, distant way. Like, yeah, I basically wasn't interested in being particularly interconnected with these people. I just wanted the thing I was getting. And meanwhile, it was definitely a sense of me living my life, getting what I need to live my life, meditating, even going on retreat a bit. Well, that came later, and then getting on with my career, and you get the idea, like quite a strong sense of self and all that. So some recognition of interconnectedness, but not an awful lot. But then I went on this retreat. It was a 5-day retreat, the summer of '97, and I always remember because as we came off the retreat and I got in the taxi driver said, "Have you heard about Lady Diana?" Or must be Princess Diana. "Have you heard about Princess Diana?" And I'm like, "What?" And that was when she died in the tunnel in Paris. Was the summer of '97. So there I was, and I had a really good retreat. And out of that retreat, this was London Buddhist Retreat, a guy called Maitreya Bandhu put together, you might know from his books and courses, he put together a group of us, of men, to then meet every week. And that was a shift. That was a shift. When I agreed to do that, that was a shift, because suddenly people would get to know me and they were expecting me. And I remember one particular week when I was at work, I was tired at the end of the day. We used to start quite early. We started at 7 in the morning, and then we usually finish at 6. I was working on the trading floor as a bond salesman, and I was tired by 6 o'clock, and I thought, do I really want to go? I don't really want to go. I'll go home. But I remember that I was presenting to the group. I was going to give them a summary of the material that week, and I thought, I'd better go because, otherwise you can. So almost out of that kind of duty, I went, and I've had a great evening, had a really wonderful evening, and I had that experience a few times in a way, and I noticed I never regretted going. I don't remember ever regretting. I was really becoming, the second level, if you like, of participant. I was definitely engaged. I was letting people know me. I was getting to know other people. Basically, I was starting to develop friendships with people there at the London Buddhist Centre. Some of whom I'm now in the order with, actually. I met with one of them in Stroud the other day, all these years later. I'd say that's the second level, a participant way, and I imagine most of you are probably at least at that level, where you're definitely participating. You're seeing this as more than just a class where you get something and then head home, you make your payment, and off you go. It's, in other words, it's gone a bit beyond just an exchange. You're starting to see yourself as connected to other people in the Sangha. You're starting to see the benefit of in a way choosing who you connect with. Because interesting, interconnectedness, it's not as though there's no will. I remember once when I was young, I was working for an American sales company, very aspirational sales company, just sell books door to door. Originally it'd been Bibles. It was quite a Christian company in Memphis, Tennessee. And one of the big mentors there said, in 20 years' time, you'll be the same person you are now, except for the books you read and the people you associate with. You'll be the same person in 20 years' time, apart from the books you read and the people you associate with. So obviously, in choosing to participate in the Sangha and being here, you're directing your interconnectedness, so to speak, and that will have an effect, and hopefully that really helps you in your efforts to realise that vision, to transform yourself in line with that vision that you have. So I would say that's the second level, as kind of participant. And then there's a third level, which I've called contributor. Again, someone's got to come up with better names than this, but anyway, contributor. And that was an interesting shift. I remember being at I went to meet, there was again Maitreya Bandhu. We met up at, he's very into art, and we went to see some art at Tate Britain, and I didn't find art particularly easy. I still don't, although I'm more into it than I used to be. And he was helping me get into art, and we looked at this art. I remember being in a cafe afterwards, and him, us talking about, he decided he wanted to put on a Buddhist opera. Right, normal thought, isn't it? You probably had the same thought many times. Why not put on a Buddhist opera? Just to clarify though, he wasn't a musician. I think he played the trombone to grade 6 or something, but as a child. But he wasn't a musician. He wasn't an opera director. He liked opera, still does, but he had no skills or experience or network at all in opera. And he put on a Buddhist opera. And I offered to help. I offered to take unpaid leave from my job and help him be his production manager and his stage manager for this opera. It was called The Triumph of Life. I think it was in 2003, I think he came on, in Stratford, East London, the Stratford Circus, I think it's called. I think that's right. So we put on a Buddhist opera together, and it was one of the highlights of my life. I mean, being around those singers. He got some professionals, but mainly student singers learning opera, and it was just such a delight. All those rehearsals, listening to beautiful music throughout that period. I don't know what time of year it was, but so lovely. At the London Buddhist Arts Centre. And that in a way was me starting to not just participate but even give, if you like, start to give of myself. And it was a wonderful experience. And, it's the usual thing, you've all heard it, but when you start to give, then you really start to receive. It's very hard to remember that in the moment, isn't it? When somebody's asking for something or you see a need, it's very hard to remember that. But that was one example. And indeed, Future Dharma Fund, I guess, was another example of. What was it? I mean, that was me definitely seeing a need, and seeing, God, there's really not enough money here. We haven't got enough money. We've got this amazing jewels. We've got the Buddha, we've got the Dharma, we've got the Sangha, but there's never enough money. I remember seeing these. I went to this big meeting of chairmen and women from all the different European Buddhist centres. There was the meeting in Herefordshire, which Viranaka knows well, and they were looking at how they were going to distribute the money. And I remember being in this meeting and they were trying to decide the budget, and they had this big discussion for maybe 40 minutes about whether to give £1,000 or £2,000 to this particular project. And I'd come from a world, obviously, in a city where that's what you might spend on a dinner or something, and this was like for a year's expenditure on some outreach project in wherever. And I just, and I thought this has to change. So I said, let's start. Let's set £1 million target. Let's raise £1 million and just do this. What if you had £1 million? What would you do? In fact, no. The question was, if money were no object, what would you do? And that was the start of what became Future Dharma Fund. So that third level of contributor. And I imagine a lot of you probably give money every month to the Brixton Sangha, and a lot of you are on the teams here. Eleanor's here doing the filming. Some of you are here setting up, setting up that amazing looking cake stall up outside, which I'm sorry to be missing. That was, a lot of you, I'm sure, are all contributing in different ways. I think that's really entering into the truth of interconnectedness really fully. And it's quite hard to do in a way, because I think we're naturally, because we live in such an individualistic society, I think it's the water we swim in, as they say, so we don't really see it. I've seen it a bit more when I've gone to India, which is a much less, becoming more individualistic, but classically is a much more communal society, for better and worse. I mean, you've got casteism as well, but much more communal. People don't think it in the terms out there of me and my life, what do I need? They think, what does my family need? And family doesn't just mean my wife and children, it means like all the cousins and the rest of it. It's like much more a sense of like feeling a sense of identity with a much broader group. Whereas we will tend naturally, I'm sure it's the fruit of the Enlightenment, meaning the sort of Enlightenment of Descartes and so forth of the 18th century. We think in terms of our individual needs, our individual rights, our individual lives. I mean, my mother, bless her, will always say, well, the most important thing is you and your happiness, whatever. I don't think that's something that would be said 500 years ago in Britain, or today, or certainly 50 years ago in India, where it's much more about, it's about duty, it's about service. I remember the first time I met a guy in India, he wasn't even a Buddhist actually, and I said, oh, so what do you want to do? He said, well, I work in, some professional service, but what I really want to do is I want to serve society. I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. I'd literally never heard anyone say that. What I really want to do is I want to serve society. And without any, I was like, okay, right. It was really an extraordinary moment. So I think that is quite a shift for us as Westerners. You may be very different to me. I was, as Mike Schneider suggested, extremely self-centered young man. My life ambition was to be a millionaire. It wasn't to serve society when I was a child. So I didn't even want to be a fireman, or an astronaut. I just wanted to be rich. So I was quite unusual, perhaps. You're not as extreme, but still, it's very much in our culture, that individualism. So and a real suspicion of religious groups. Come on, let's face it, a real suspicion of religious groups, a fear of cults. All that stuff. It's very deep in us, and I don't just mean us individually. I mean us collectively. Like that's the zeitgeist. That's the water we swim in. So there's understandably there'll always be resistance. I think even after ordination, I felt that resistance at times. What about me? And this isn't right. And do I really want to serve this? Do I want to participate in this? But what you can see through those three levels of recipient, participant, contributor is a changing motivation from very much an I-focused motivation at the start, totally fine and normal, don't worry. And then hopefully over time there's a kind of opening up where there's a sense of interconnectedness, let's say at that second level with others who are doing the same thing you're doing. But then at that third level, actually, even beyond that, like a sense of interconnectedness with all beings. The fact that, in a way, what we're doing here on this Saturday afternoon here, in a sense, does have ripples out, you could say, to the whole world, without being too grandiose, but in very subtle ways, ripples out to the whole world. Certainly in the sense that you're participating in a global Sangha. I say at least 100,000 people, it might be 200,000, it's all a bit of a guesstimate, but there's no database, but that kind of number. And but also in more subtle ways. I mean, it's really interesting that when I started out in Buddhism, the word mindfulness was not a thing. Like nobody had heard the word mindfulness. And veganism was, back in the 90s, was seriously fringe activity. I mean, very wacky indeed, like embarrassing. All the cliches about lentil burgers or whatever, like just very fringe activity. Now, of course, both those things are absolutely mainstream. You can go into a Green King pub and I'll have a vegan dish. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It's extraordinary. In fact, I was at a Green King and had a Beyond Meat, vegan Beyond Meat, cheeseburger. It's just incredible. So now I don't know that Sri Ratna over 55 years has been part of this Buddhist movement has contributed that. I think it'd be very hard to argue it's had no effect. People like you who've come through our classes will, of course, be in the hundreds of thousands. If there's 100,000 involved right now, then over 55 years, obviously there's been many hundreds of thousands. That will have had some effect. But yeah, I'm sure we have affected society. And in fact, I know very directly that one of our audit has been given an OBE for her services to mindfulness, a woman called Vidyamala. So very clear, that's been recognised, obviously, at the highest level in Britain. So yeah, I think we do affect wider society. We do affect the wider world, definitely, subtly, indirectly, and directly. Yeah, there's definitely. So then you can see those ripples of interconnectedness go much wider, and I think certainly at that level of contributor where you're really seeing that and valuing that, and you want to pass on what you've been given. These precious jewels, you want to pass them on. That is one recognising that, and that's one's motivation starting to change and realising actually the truth of this saying of Sangharakshita, which I've always loved, which is you can't help yourself without helping other people, and you can't help other people without helping yourself. That truth starts to gradually dawn, of course, the longer you practice on the path. I should probably wrap up. So yeah, that's been quite a journey from that dusty high street in, call it a high street, that street, the only street, in Pokhara 27 years ago. That's been quite a journey from that and meeting this Swiss guy, this slightly sort of, I almost want to say blocked, but anyway, certainly quite kind of uncommunicative Swiss guy telling me that Buddhism was about interconnectedness to, I suppose to now giving a talk to you about interconnectedness and the Sangha as both an experience of interconnectedness and a value of interconnectedness, but also a value for the world, something that really gives and affects the whole world in some very subtle and indirect ways that we'll never be able to prove in a statistical study, but I think one can have a lot of confidence in.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed that Dharma talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist Community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a class, a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that. And that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.